You're listening to the Merry Band of Pirates, an unofficial Expeditionary Force podcast.
Welcome back to the Merry Band of Pirates, an unofficial Expeditionary Force podcast. I'm Andy, and I'm joined by my fellow pirates, Joey, Mariane, Steve, and Jake. Pirate Charlie has unfortunately come down with a case of monkeypox, but we wish him well. But we are joined by a guest pirate, Adam. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Adam happens to be related to Steve, unfortunately. But we'll let that pass and let him contribute. Luckily, the reason we have Steve is because Adam told him about Expeditionary Force. So we'll go with it. Now, tonight, we are talking about chapters 4 and 5 from Columbus Day, Paradise, and Intel. Wow, look at us. We're doing 2 chapters at the same time. We're picking up the pace. First, I want to talk about the fact that last episode, we interviewed Craig Allenson. Did happen. If you somehow missed that episode, go back. You stop this episode right now. Go back and listen to it.
I just have to interrupt because we had that interview, and I have one problem with your intro there, Andy. You said we're the unofficial podcast, but now we're the officially unofficial, or the unofficially official podcast per Craig. I don't remember which way that went, but we get to add official to our unofficial on the title of the podcast.
That's true. We could probably say it. We already got all the socials and everything. I don't know if we can change the name now, but that's true. He blessed us with that officially unofficial, whatever it might be. So thank you to Craig again.
Well, we are still waiting to hear from the lawyers about that, but I'm expecting something very positive. As you should always expect positive things from lawyers.
I don't know about that. But moving on, we had a great time. So thanks again to Craig for that. Go back and listen. So let's start with chapter 4. We're going to talk about Paradise. Joey, do you want to give us a breakdown on this one? Who did we meet? Where did we end up? All that fun stuff.
Yeah, so I know it's been a while, about a month since we talked about the last chapter, chapter 3, which was Camp Alpha. And that left off at the end of that chapter with Joe leaving to go on his first deployment, really, after training. And that was the Planet of Paradise. And that is the title of this chapter. And essentially, that starts with him getting there, and he's using another space elevator. So there you go, Steve. We actually get a mention of a second space elevator. It might be the second of 3, I think, mentions of
We'll get one another like 18 bucks from now. We'll get another mention of space elevator, but that's about it.
That's about it. And so as great as that is, they don't really come back a whole lot. But anyway, he does talk about the differences between Theranan space elevators and Ruhar space elevators. And this whole chapter is essentially Joe traveling from one place to the other. I mean, it's like that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark where the plane flies over the map. But it's an entire chapter just describing how Joe goes from this, the Star Carrier and the troop transport in space down the elevator to what he refers to as a Dumbo, which is, think of like a 747, but I think he even says it's several times larger than a 747. It's a troop transport, which flies him, around the planet through the atmosphere, where he then gets to another air base where he gets on another aircraft. It's a buzzard, another nickname that the humans gave it. And so he gets on the buzzard, and think of it like a Black Hawk helicopter. So he gets on that, and it flies him to the village that he's going to. Once he gets there, he goes to the motor pool where he finds the Humvee, which is kind of the hamster version of the Humvee, military vehicle talk. And finally, eventually, he ends up getting to the Village of Teskor. We do meet one interesting character, a gentleman by the name of Lester Cornhut, which we're going to talk about quite a bit, I think, for the rest of the hour. But he's a great character. He comes back in future books. So it's definitely one that, if you don't know about Lester Cornhut, he's one of the Ruhar. He's a hamster. And it's essentially Joe's job to, he's an embedded observation team, or at least he's the sergeant in charge of one. And their job is just to basically reach out and touch the hearts and minds of the hamsters living in that area before they get taken off planet. It's a very easy job. He kind of talks about that. He uses that as an excuse whenever the soldiers in his group start complaining. He's like, "Come on, guys, this is kind of an easy job. We don't have to really do a whole lot. Just watch the hamsters farm, and that's about it." And Lester's kind of the unofficial leader. Tells them they don't actually have a government there. There is no leadership. It's just farmers in a community. But by the end of this chapter, Lester invites Joe to come to a very important meeting with the regional governor, and that's where the chapter ends, Andy.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Joey. Yeah, we get into a lot more. That's kind of what you said. This is somewhat transitional. I mean, I guess you can kind of say at least the beginning portion, like you were saying from Raiders, could be just a montage. I do like that one part where Joe talks about he wants to hang his legs outside of the buzzard, but the guy says, "Yeah, you can go ahead and do that, but close the door on your way out, or close the door behind you." That was great. So we talked about one of the pivotal characters, Lester Cornhut. I am Lester Cornhut. I love that part. I love the way that he did his voice in that. We will talk about R.C. Bray in every episode. It's a requirement. But Steve, give me what you think about Lester. We know that he's a farmer. What else do we know?
There are a handful of characters, just especially in the nature of a series that is so long with so many books, characters that are going to come and go, characters that you're going to meet one time, you're like, oh, that was a funny character, and then they're going to disappear and you're never going to hear again about them ever again. I'm kind of glad that's not the case with Lester Cornhut, because he in some ways is this transitional character that exists mostly to get you in touch with the Burgermeister. But by creating a fun character that everybody connects with, I'm really glad that that character gets to come back later on in relationships with the Mavericks, and I've got a special Lester Cornhut shirt that I'll wear for an episode here at some point. So I'm really yeah. Adam's like he's me. Yeah, Adam's the one that gave me the shirt. So in the last episode, we had my glass that my sister had made with Skippy on it that I was drinking from, and but the Lester Cornhut's Paradise Pale Ale T-shirt was a compliment of my brother there. Great fun character that is going to give you both a sense of the personality of the Ruhar, and I think that we need to be sure of this. This is the first kind of individual Ruhar that we're getting to interact with, that we get to know what they're like as a species. He's a farmer. He's thinking about farmer things, connects him with Joe, or makes Joe feel connected to him. He knows what it was like to work the land, and he's seeing Lester Cornhut and the other people of Teskor that are working the land. They're working folks. We're also going to get a chance to hear from Lester Cornhut that they don't raise the cow, they raise a steak. And the scene where Joe goes into the barn and is a little weirded out by the meat being grown without any nervous system, without any heads. But yeah, super fun character, and I'm really glad that we're going to get to hear more about Lester in future books.
Yeah, that's a great breakdown of him. I like how we kind of skipped ahead because and we always go to you for the food, and that's one of the few ones in this chapter we get to talk about. We're not actually eating it, but yeah, I guess that's kind of in the galley with Colonel Joe. But yeah, we're growing the steak, and I love it when they talk about he has that logo on his hat, and is that the brand of the tractor they use or something like that? So I was thinking, like, is it John Hamster,
local sports team, or the company that made the tractor? Yeah, that's a great joke thrown in there.
Yeah, John Hamster is what I think it is.
Right at the beginning of the chapter, Joe starts talking about, like, oh, we're gonna get to the planet and we're gonna meet the hamsters, and they're gonna see, like, the whole idea was, we're pissed, the hamsters are enemy. We're gonna treat them the way they treated us because they came to Earth and destroy our electrical systems and power plants and whatever. But the whole time he gets there and he starts meeting all these people, he's like thrown back because they're all farmers. They're not military. They're not like giving any trouble. Some of them gives trouble, but like the majority is just treating them as people, not differently because they attacked Earth. Or he even see the kids playing soccer. He gives the kids a soccer ball. He like figured it out that the kids deserve a soccer ball and give them one. And with time, he starts seeing that even with the relationship with Cornhut, like, he sees that the hamsters is not that bad, and we'll see more to the chapter when he meets the Burgermeister. The whole story behind the attack on Earth and everything. So there's like this huge disconnection between what he thought and what he sees and how he feels about it.
Yeah, it's starting to the first instances of change, right?
I think chapter 4, Lester, if you didn't get it with the fuzzy face, what's that in chapter 1?
Mhm.
You're starting to really ask yourself as the reader, are these guys really the bad guys in this story? They don't seem like the bad guys. They're not militant. They're very relatable, especially with Joe growing up in the small hometown USA lifestyle where he's a farmer. He connects to them right away. Even in chapter 1, he's able to connect with the hamsters. And Lester is just a real relatable character. I don't know why. Maybe because it's the fuzzy face, but I think of someone like Smokey the Bear when I think of Lester. Just someone that's not going out of his way to be liked, but he's just genuine. He's not fake. He's who he is, and he's proud of who he is. And in this chapter, I really started to think, I don't think the hamsters are necessarily the bad guys. There's just so much at play here that we are so far from understanding, and that continues throughout the book, this book especially. But I'm a Lester fan, and
Nice.
I want to get some of those T-shirts you're talking about there, Steve.
Yeah, they have it's a Lester Cornhut's Pale Ale, I believe it was, right? Something like that.
Yeah,
But
I
go ahead,
don't
Adam.
think they make them anymore. So
No.
I think they're vintage now. They were taken off the website a while ago. So it's a collector's item now. Sorry.
There you go.
So big.
Well,
money.
Adam, now that you have joined us for this week, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and give us your thoughts on Chapter 4?
Sure. Like I said, my name's Adam. I introduced Steve to the series. I found out about this series probably right around when book 3 was coming out, right when the audiobooks were first kind of hitting the scene. So I caught on to that pretty early on, and I couldn't shut up about it after that. So I got many people hooked. So here we are. I've gone on and I've done the entire fanboying thing. Went to Bray Fest, met RC Bray, met Craig, and I got a little souvenir from that I was telling you guys about earlier there, where I be jealous. I've got a voicemail from RC Bray that he made for me as the voice of Skippy.
Andy, if you need me to, then next time I see him, then I'll make sure I go and permanently delete that just for your sake. Okay.
Listen, I'm jealous, and also I'm like, yeah, okay, you're so cool, but do not delete that. I would not want to.
I've got copies all over the place. There's no single point of failure.
There's redundancy.
All right, good. We got a raid system. It's good. All right. What about Chapter 4 are you thinking?
Right. So I like to refer to this time as, the BBC, the before the beer can. So it's really builds up this entire world for me of just these people that are inexperienced going on onto this other world, this entirely foreign thing for them, where they begin to meet and really interact with their first species in a meaningful way, right? The Kristang were never a meaningful ally where they got to know and got to have a conversation with. So this is the first time where we actually get to see that maybe humans could have a part in the greater universe, right? That they could find their way into, find their way through this war, maybe getting a couple of friends along the way. So
I like that. No, that's it reminds me of it was a British, comedy sketch, and it was a bunch of guys dressed up as Nazis, and they're like, "Are we the baddies?" Because they were finally realizing, like, wait a second, we're not the good guys in this. But no, thank you for that, Adam. Like we said, this is somewhat of a transitional chapter. So we've met Lester. He's pivotal guy. He's moving on. But Joey, you brought it up before. You made it really a good point to it. We're getting to the Burgermeister, Baturnah Logellia. And she becomes a very pivotal person in that. Marianne, do you want to do a breakdown of this chapter? Tell us, the people we've met, what happens. A lot happens in this. I mean, I don't expect you to give us everything, so we'll spread it around.
So let's see. We have Emily Perkins right before Joe meets with the Burgermeister. Joe has an interaction with Emily, and Emily's like, "Well, I'll meet with her." And Joe's like, sorry, but she wants to meet with me. You sit down and stay sideways." And Emily got pissed because, come on, she's a major. She is the higher ranking than Joe, and nobody wants to see her. They want to see Joe, and all because of what happened in Earth. Once, because Joe helped the fuzzy face. So that's the first interaction we really see with Emily Perkins. Later on, we'll have a lot of interactions with her and know more about her life and get to know all the trouble she gets into, and even get in trouble and not helping with the pirates at some point.
And experience her voice change as well. I noticed that going back to this chapter, I'm like, she sounds way different.
Yeah.
But I get it, especially as you get more into a character, R.C. Bray is going to establish the way he wants to perform that. But yeah, I thought that was a funny note.
Yeah, but we got to love him. I got to love Emily Perkins just because they do everything they do, just moving way ahead. They get into so much trouble and get out of trouble without even the help of Skippy. So it makes me love her even more.
I love that he even mentions that in Ground State. It talks about how they're capable of getting into trouble. I mean, we all think it, so it's nice that he finally kind of dropped it in there that they're capable of doing so much damage without the help of the beer can.
Yes.
And props to Craig to be able to write those stories for them without Skippy causing or giving them the reason to get out of it. They figured out themselves. So it props to him on being able to kind of set similar storylines that way. I thought that's pretty cool. But
yeah, and another major character we meet, of course, is Baturnah Logellia, the Burgermeister. She is at the time when Joe meets with her, she doesn't tell him exactly what's her title. She's just a higher ranking between the hamsters. And later on, we learned that she's basically who runs the country or the planet. She's a very high ranking. She's the deputy chief administrator of Gehtanu, and she's the person who will share a lot of information of what happened on Earth and how the Kristang got involved and how the hamsters got involved and how they did everything they did, why the hamsters attacked Earth, and just to show him how what they did was to protect Earth against the Kristang, because Joe gets to see who the Kristang are later on this chapter too. I don't know if I saying too much, but not saying too much. It's it's a very interesting connection, because every visit Joe just gets more information and he gets very confused with the whole situation. He wants to trust her, but he doesn't want to trust her because of everything that happened on Earth. It takes him a lot of time to understand and to really believe, to connect all the pieces together and say, yes, everything that she was telling me is true.
Yeah, that's a good breakdown. I mean, he starts to go through that internal conflict like you're talking about, and then he kind of gets supported by HQ as he's giving back some of that information. They're like, wait a second, no, go listen to her. And again, there's another piece of food items for you, Steve. He has tea. And that's about all we know.
Yeah, not every chapter has something about food that we need to highlight, but there's enough things about food that we're not going to need to invent spaces for that segment. It will present itself all on its own.
I would like to say, don't forget the Cornhut barbecue. Okay,
This is true.
It's vital. All right.
Yes. We don't know if it was barbecue. It smelled good,
It
though.
smelled like barbecue.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a good point. We also met the family of Cornhuts and other the children you talked about, and his child has said, "Thank you for the ball." And go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, you just building off what you mentioned. He says all the little corn huts, and then not like 10 seconds later, he's talks about there's one little corn hut.
Yeah.
I just
Hey,
all the little corn huts, as long as all the little corn huts involves one singular child.
Well, he might have had friends, right?
Yeah.
That were all running
Cousins
around
that were over.
Until he,
Maybe.
there you go.
Yeah, it could be extended family. We don't know. But yeah, no, I noticed that too. It's a little bit of a disagree. There's also the guys within the EOT team. They're kind of we know their names, but they're not really pivotal characters. They're only here for this chapter and then poof, gone. But in terms of characters, I think that covers all of them. Now, Adam, I'm going to throw this to you. Do you want to give us a breakdown? What are the conversations that happen between him and the Burgermeister and some other things that happen in this chapter that kind of start building this world of paradise?
Right. Well, the Burgermeister, of course, basically starts to shatter Joe's worldview, right? They have this conversation, just introduction, finds out initially that she actually knows of Joe, and why he was actually kind of famous to her was because of the way that he treated the Ruhar back in, was it chapter 1 or chapter 2? That they had managed to capture, and how well that he treated her. Treated her. She was the one that got hurt. Treated the one that they had captured, and he spoke highly of Joe through the entire time. And that word eventually gets its way all the way down to the Burgermeister, and that's what initially caused that conversation for the Burgermeister to want to talk with Joe. I think because she saw him as sort of an honorable man that she could have a conversation with, and that he might actually be open to all this new knowledge bombs that she was about to drop on him. And for the most part, he was initially he was able to take it, and then he fights back saying, "No, this is not true. You're just saying anything to make us not like our allies." And she's like, "No, not really an ally. You really shouldn't use this word. This word may not mean what you think it means, right? In this situation, right?" So it's from that they have all these conversations, and he starts reporting that up the chain, right? And finds out, the brass kind of thinks what she's saying is true, and when the brass even go ahead and leaks it to the Kristang, they immediately deny and get really angry, right? So again, that makes it true, and that makes Joe's conversations even more important throughout the rest of the chapter as he learns more and more about things like the wormhole and just the way that even the entire species interact with each other. So this is a really it's really good to build that relationship that we'll see pop up multiple times throughout the series, where they can go and have these true, honest conversations, and it's really tough. Again, I was talking earlier about the way that this is the introduction of maybe the humans finding friends out there, and this really lays the groundwork for that.
No, it's a really good point. I mean, and like we were saying, both reoccurring characters, both Burgermeister and Lester Cornhut. We learn a lot at the end there about, like you talk about, wormhole shifts, the way that the Ruhar were watching the Kristang and traveling at the same time. And Joe's like, "No, bullshit. It's no way." But there's the one point where they're talking about the weather affects their mood, and Joey, I know this is one of your favorites. Explain that to us.
Well, even Steve, uses this term. I've used this as well, Steve, to see the strange look on people's faces when you use it, and they kind of look at you like, "What are you even saying?" And somehow, oddly, that word makes sense to describe what you're talking about. And the word is a Ruhar word, Schlumpernur. It's described or defined as a word that translates to a damp, mushy blanket, or musty blanket, a damp, musty blanket. And it really, it kind of creates a really beautiful picture. One of the hard things about writing, especially when writing books, is how to translate things like, the physical space that the characters are in. And I think that not only do I think Craig liked that description, but he's able to use that word several times throughout this chapter to just kind of describe what's going on in this environment that they're in. And then once it lifts, the Schlumpernur's gone. And so if you've never heard this word before, if you've not read the books, I don't know why you'd be listening to our show if you hadn't, but feel free to drop some Schlumpernur terminology on some people, or some other Ruhar words like ta for yes, and have some fun with it and see if you can get some strange looks from some people.
I love using the term Schlumpernur because the looks that you're going to get are inevitably going to be really strange. But there's something about the power of words. There are some words that just feel like what they mean. I think of the word like winsome. Winsome is a very winsome word. Just the way that it sounds, it feels like what it conveys. And somehow, without knowing what a Schlumpernur is, you could probably still feel like, that is a great, if you're going to make up a word, that's a great word.
Mm-hmm. Give that credit to Craig there.
Yeah.
The problem about me using that word, people would look at me and say, "Are you trying to speak Portuguese right now?" So
I was going to say maybe German. If anything, I thought it sounded German to me. But yeah, no, it's a specifically Ruhar word. But Jake, I wanted you to dig into something pivotal happens when they're talking about when the Burgermeister asks Joe to take out his earpiece, out his Z phone.
All their Z phones, their technology, everything that they are able to have is bugged. It's being spied on. Basically. The Kristang is totally eavesdropping on absolutely everything. They're gathering information. And as everybody knows, in a military field, you can never have too much information. So the Kristang, they also have this alternative objective here. They're just using the humans, but they're also keeping their guard up around the humans. They're eavesdropping on everything. They're trying to find out their movements. And that's going to lay opportunity for them to restrict the humans, to hold them back. Because as we said in a previous show, that I think the Kristang have already acknowledged that the humans are capable of being a threat. Even though they don't respect the human beings, they don't like them, they think they're gross and disgusting. I think it's not really spoiling anything if we say the Kristangs have their own absolute weakness and failures all throughout their civilization. And they don't trust anybody. They don't even like themselves. They're the exact polar opposite of the hamsters. I feel like humans kind of somewhere lie in the middle. But when she tells them to take out the technology, she can have a more honest conversation. And that's when things are really starting to click. Because on Earth, we do have the technology, and we've been doing it for a long time to spy on our enemies. And I think that's the light bulb moment, the major light bulb moment for Joe Bishop. He's like, why didn't I think of this? Yeah. Of course, they would be bugging our equipment. And it's a big eye-opening moment.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I like how you touched on the literary aspect of it there, right? You get the bad guys and now the good guys, and then the humans are somewhere in the middle, and they're like choosing sides almost, right? How do they feel about it? And you talked about the Kristang, being the bad guys, and they're treating the humans like patrons, and of course the humans, like the Burgermeister points out, don't really realize that you're not allies, you're slaves, And so we learn a lot from the Burgermeister throughout this chapter. And then, Steve, what kind of happens at the end? Where are we seeing Joe go to? Joe Bishop.
Oh, Bishop.
Joe
Bishop.
Yeah.
That's so great.
I love it.
So we finally get to... man, there's so much. I feel like the wormhole shift and the implications there that are still to be considered, and we could spend the next hour breaking down all of the conversations between Joe and the Burgermeister, because there is so much. The nature of the relationships between the Kristang clans. That's the first time that we kind of get to really understand the different clans, as well as why that attack on Earth happened. Not only the wormhole shift, but also the inner Kristang politics that were at play. So there's so many pieces of that we need to make sure that coming out of this chapter that we pay good attention to.
I was going to say, two things came to mind immediately after you said that. There's the way that the Burgermeister explains the way that they attacked Earth, right? They only went for infrastructure. They did not want to hurt people, talking about collateral damage, and that being a part of war. And that's why they specifically went and did the things they did in terms of the way that they were almost trying to make us look, I'm saying us like it actually happened, make us look less appetizing to the Kristang in some ways. But then we talk about that. And then I also thought about how we have the village Ruhar still planting their crops towards the end of the chapter there, and Joe and his team going to figure out why. And they're looking at it from a much longer perspective, right? They've been in this war for thousands and thousands of years. Humans are, we just showed up. We were just born. And now they're like, oh, okay, we're going to prepare for the future.
Yeah, and it's interesting because even they say like, oh, why are you guys still planting? Like, you guys are evacuating. But at the same time, the answer was like, well, if we don't eat it, we know you guys will be able to use it for the future. So it's like the hamsters are showing their thoughts, their compassion, their empathy over all of this. It's not just like, oh, we are not gonna do anything to help you guys. We are just gonna let the planet die off because we are not staying here.
I kept thinking about, like, there's so much in that interaction with the Burgermeister that has so long of ramifications. We didn't talk about the effect of the genetic cloning of the Theranin. Like, there's so much that gets disclosed there that we'll unpack in future episodes for sure. But to come back to the question you asked, like at the end, because this is kind of starts to get to the emotional place where Joe and his team and overall humanity, imagine, on Paradise starts to be, that coming out of the Schlumpernur around them almost becomes a picture of the Schlumpernur that starts to happen inside of Joe and his team. It's this. I really think it's that he is feeling the isolation. He's feeling the we're not hearing. So he hears from the Burgermeister. You're not going to hear from them. You're not going to hear from home. There's not going to be any news. They're not delivering your message. And so the reality of the isolation that that humanity on Paradise finds himself, that he's starting to kind of feel the effect of that. And of course, we're going to start hearing there are no messages coming from Earth. That's going to show up obviously in significant ways in coming chapters. But I think that this is the first time where you see Joe and his team start to feel the emotional weight of an endless deployment. We're not getting any news. It used to be, even in Nigeria, I could Skype and there might be a little bit of lag time, but I could talk to the family. Now there's, at the end of the world's longest supply chain, there is no access to food. There's no access to information. There's no access to healthcare. No access to anything apart from the Kristang. And the Kristang are not going to give that.
Like, I love the reference of Skype in here. It's already an outdated reference because Skype no longer exists. So I think it's hilarious that we now have this even reference from Columbus Day that is outdated.
And it was only 10 years ago, which is crazy. It's like, well, they didn't have Teams or Zoom or any of that stuff. We love Zoom. We're using Zoom currently. Please don't block us.
The
Jake,
Zoom AI may come for you, Andy.
It's funny that we talk about outdated references because, as we know, Joe Bishop is for Maine, and the book is called Columbus Day. Makes perfect sense. May no longer celebrates Columbus Day.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's Indigenous People
peoples.
Day.
oh,
Yeah.
that's right. Yes. Well, it's still
It's still Columbus
same
Day.
event, I guess.
Yeah.
Let's steer away from the politics.
And
Or in
No,
other
but
words,
Jake-
let's sail away from it.
Yeah,
Like Columbus would have done.
ooh,
Oh,
I see the
all right.
pun.
Oh man.
I like it. I like it. Okay, this is a serious podcast. I swear.
As Pirate Adam said, what was it? BBC before the beer can. This
Yep.
is probably one of my favorite chapters because I did find myself becoming a fan of the hamsters. I think they're more pacifists, even though they've been at war for 10,000 years. They don't really seem to be. They're not enthralled with war. They're in war because somebody wants to take advantage of them, take them over. You know, it's kind of that old cliche: don't mistake kindness for weakness. They're very stubborn and determined, beings. But I really do like the chapter. I like how they touch base on the kids, and they're not too different than human kids. Like Joe Bishop gives the little Cornhuts the ball, and they know exactly what to do with it. They're polite. They seem very moral and value background. Family's very important. And I don't know. I kind of like that. I kind of like thinking that there's aliens out there in our universe that are doing the same thing. You know, that essentially that we are doing that. They're not really that far different from us. And I became a hamster lover here. This is where I start to love the fuzzy faces.
You heard it here first, folks.
I did. I
Jake
love
is
hamsters.
a hamster lover.
Breaking news.
Yeah, I would go there. Yeah, it's a good thing I'm married because I could see myself dating a hamster.
Okay.
Wow.
Joey, what were your thoughts on the
Ooh, I
chapter?
don't know if I want to follow that.
Yeah, we have the ability to edit.
There's thank goodness. There's a lot going on in this chapter, chapter 5. You know, we kind of touched on it, but you know, in deployment, chapter 2, they talk about kind of like, oh, the Kristang are not really kind of galactically in charge. We had to hitch a ride with Thrannen, and then we get to Camp Alpha, and he gets his debriefing on all the coalitions, and that's the second time we kind of get a rundown on things. And here we are a third time in chapter 5 in Intel with the Burgermeister is giving Joe kind of again, here's a breakdown of how the Kristang work. Here's what, here's a little inside nugget on Thrannen that they actually had a genocide at one point. There were different types of skin tones, and now they've basically decided this is the master race, and so now they genetically duplicate those. And then she goes on further to just keep going down to talk about the Max Ulks and the Rindaloo, and how the fact that Joe equates it to mutually assured destruction, which is why during the Cold War we didn't really have a war, because if we had, that would have been the end of humanity. And so and again, they've talked about this before, but then she kind of explains why. It's not nuclear weapons, it's these things called Sentinels that at some point they released these elder weapons, and it woke up these things that come from outside of time and space that started wreaking havoc and destruction. And so it's kind of interesting that he's slow. I mean, it feels like he's just data dumping all this world building on us, but he really is kind of trying to slow down. And Craig, the author, is giving it to us a sort of a bite at a time if you slow down and listen to it or read through it. So it's kind of interesting that we're getting a little bit more layered on top. And of course, as the book series goes on and as Skippy gets involved, he starts explaining things in even more detail so we can understand how things go. But it is interesting that he continues to keep looping back around to add a little bit more context.
He talks about the mutual assured destruction. Here's my question for all of you. Do you think he planned to go the mutually assured destruction at the highest level of the coalition, the senior species level here? Like, do you think he already had that in the back of his mind that eventually you're going to end up, or was that something he just threw in there now, and it just so happened that a dozen books later became the plot path that he took? Like, because there's so much forward thinking in his planning, there's times where I stop and think, I don't know. I wonder if he had that plan, or I wonder if he just ended up in that place.
I personally think that he probably, had mapped out, because I think when we interviewed him, or previous interviews, he talked about how he had like the first 3 books kind of planned out. So, and I know it doesn't necessarily happen, I don't believe, in those first 3, but he brings up Sentinel. So I think he had the idea related to elders, and he was saying to himself, okay, they've been in these thousands of years of war. What's preventing them from destroying themselves? So he came up with something. Whether he was going to expand on it or not, and how he was going to do all that, I don't think he knew. But I think he had like, all right, let me give a little nugget here, and to just have it make sense. Because so many times when geeks like us go and look at things, they're like, hey, there's a plot problem here. There's no reason that they didn't just blow each other up. We would have called him out on it. So yes, forward thinking, smart about that. How he was going to do it, I don't think so.
Yeah, I just want to end my thought on the chapter with kind of the end of the chapter, how Emily Perkins shows up and says, "You're done here, Joe. You're not in Teskor anymore. You're being reassigned," which is going to take us into the next chapter. You know, it's kind of interesting how these, you know, this 4 and 5 really do go together, because 4 starts out with him going to Teskor, 5 ends with him, you know, being relocated, and it all comes down to the intel that he's getting. That's the name of the chapter, right? So the intel has led to some disruptions going on at the top level between the Kristang and the leadership of the humans, and the best case scenario here is to just hide Joe away. So he's actually, it's not his whole team that's leaving. They're going to get a new leader, and Joe's just going to go there, you know, away, and they're going to find some work for him. And nobody's really clear on the whole thing, because the whole plan is just to kind of like, you know, put him someplace where he could be a little bit more quiet, where maybe he won't be in as much trouble, which, as we know, getting into future chapters, is going to be not the case. So
I love it when he goes, am I in trouble, ma'am? When he gets, you know, reassigned or whatever.
It's interesting how not only does he think he's in trouble, but he even, there's a point in there where he says, if I'm going to get demoted, well, I haven't been a sergeant that long anyway, and I'm willing to fall on that sword. It's pretty funny, you know.
I remember I've listened to Craig do many an interview on this, and from what I remember, he, as you said, he only had the first couple books mapped out, because, you know, he didn't think this was going to be a thing, right? He didn't think he was going to be successful, right? So he only wrote the first one sort of as a lark, and then went on from there. So I don't think he had any sort of concept of how he wanted to wrap anything up. But once he did take it serious, then I do. So I would think around like book 4 or 5, he was starting to think, all right, now I've got this big arc that I'm doing, and I'll wrap it up here. And this is where I can bring in some of these elements that I've introduced earlier, even in book 1, that he'll bring back. So I do like the fact that he did make all these notes and does go back and tries and fills in some of these, what, as you said, would be glaring plot holes, right? So at that time, no, I don't think he had any concept of how he was going to do anything with it, but it is a reoccurring theme that we will see multiple times as we go forward.
Do you guys remember how does Joe kind of explain what what the planet smells like?
I do.
So, just question.
Parmesan cheese.
The question is, you guys could smell it when he talked about the...
Yes.
I didn't
Absolutely.
want to.
I'm sorry.
You didn't want to. It's a good point.
I'm going to tell a story of like when I was in college, right? We were downwind of a chicken plant, right? And if the wind turned one way, you would get this whiff all over the university campus. And to my we called it the dog food smell, but to me, that's how I envisioned the Parmesan cheese smell. It's sort of this, it's kind of this like higher note kind of whiff of, you know, I could probably pinpoint what this is, but it's really hard, right? You know, I guess all these sort of analogies of what it could be. So it would just waft over the entire campus. And we're like, oh, wind changed. And so I can imagine being on a planet like where that just, that upper aroma is there throughout the entire experience.
They must have gone nose blind at some point because they mentioned it here in chapter 5, and then you never hear about
That's
the
it.
Parmesan cheese.
Never again.
I was gonna say, I think I like how he says Parmesan cheese, and at least for me, I'm literally picturing myself in the car listening to this, and then he goes to really describe. It's like not the kind that you put on the pasta sauce. It's when you've been sick, and then you get a whiff of Parmesan cheese that's been sitting on the counter for way too long, and it literally changed in my nose as I'm hearing him describe this. I'm like, huh.
Like
Andy, I
Sanchez.
almost campaigned that discussion of the Parmesan cheese when you're sick should be in the galley with Colonel Joe segment.
Oh,
Yeah.
please
but,
no.
but I felt like that wasn't the way to go.
That is not something that they're enjoying.
Yeah.
Not something that they need
No,
for
not a good thing.
consumption.
Well,
No.
and if his descriptions of Parmesan cheese don't actually translate, then he links it to this character Sanchez's feet or something.
Yes, yes. That's what Chen is saying. That's right. Chen's saying that.
I want to stick on food here for a little bit. They talked about the lab-grown meat.
Yeah.
In this case, I guess it's more like a barn-grown meat. That's something, at least I knew like 5 years ago, they were actually experimenting with here on Earth. And I've never tried it. I would try it, though. I absolutely would try it. But would you guys?
I think I would try it. I think it was really cool the way they described it. What I wanted to know was like, does it still have organs? Like the various organs that a regular animal would have, heart and stomach and all those kinds of things. You're not feeding it, so it doesn't really need a stomach. Kidneys,
blood, though.
liver. Yeah, right. I mean, those are the kinds of things that I was thinking about. But yeah, I'd try it. Adam?
I would say I wouldn't want to be the first person to try it,
Sure.
right? Give me 10, 15 years down the road when it's kind of more developed and more, commonplace, then I'll try it. But I'm not going to be in that first. I'm not going to be the early adopter.
Sure.
Fair.
Well, we're going to get to the point where the Ruhar scientists are starting to make food for the humans, chocolate, coffee, and there's discussion of the lab grown meat for the humans down the road. So at some point there had to be a discussion, can we try this? And even the Ruhar probably saying, please don't do that.
Yeah.
Did we
Very cool
get a conclusion to that? I don't ever recall that coming back.
What coming back?
The lab grown meat.
Like if they were able to eat it and like how I remember them talking about later on it being, food was scarce, like because they were trying to develop things that humans could eat. Because at that point he's already off of paradise. So they kind of don't get too far into it. But I don't know if they say they eat the meat or not. I know they come up with other things, but
yeah, I don't think we ever circled back around, or Craig ever circled back around to that. Even in other locations, right? If it's a good idea on Paradise, maybe it makes sense for humans elsewhere. I don't know, but we never circle back around to it.
They have to.
No, he absolutely does, because you hear about the Ruhar going and doing some lab grown meat for the humans on Paradise later on, because they even goes and say, and meat might be back on the menu. Because remember, after the Ruhar take over, they eventually are going to push the humans where they're not allowed to eat the chickens. There's all the discussion on Lemuria that the pigs that they're not allowed to eat, but they're not allowed to kill them. And so they just have to live out, but they're eating resources. Fast forward far enough in the process, and there are discussions and there's the possibility that meat might be back on the menu because the Ruhar were helping to genetically engineer the lab-grown meat for the human population.
Yeah, I guess I was just asking, did it actually come to fruition? Because we don't actually know that.
I think it had to, because humans are on Paradise for much, much, much longer in the storyline.
Still,
because we come back there. Exactly. We come back there multiple times, and clearly, they're getting enough protein somehow
from the spinach. That's what I heard from this. From the spinach.
I do think was it Joey? He said framing chapter 4 on the way into Teskor and being assigned there, and then chapter 5 ending with bugging out of Teskor. Good framing. Well done.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It was good. Good comment. Yeah, it's another literary thing that Craig's trying to do here, because it's actually quite an experience for Joe to have in Teskor and learn about what he does, and it ripples on throughout all of these books. But it's only 2 chapters. It's crazy, right? So it's again a testament to how much Craig packs into the beginning of this book, and builds this before the beer can.
BBC.
But BBC, yes. But with that, that's a wrap on this episode of the Merry Band of Pirates, the officially unofficial Expeditionary Force podcast. As homework, we want our listeners to reach out to us on socials or via email with any ideas or suggestions you might have. If we like it, this is very important, and we feel like doing it, we'll give you a shout out, but we'll see. But you can find our links to all of our socials in the show notes, or on, we're posting all the time on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, all those fun things. But join us next time as we see Joe's heroic side as he finally gets into the first battle in Chapter 6, Fort Arrow. Until then, thanks for listening. And today I would like our guest pirate Adam to send us off.
Always trust the awesomeness.
Yeah.
I messaged Craig, and
Yeah, you did. You said, "Hey, sugar bum, how you doing?"
yes, I messaged him and I said, "Thank you so much for being part of the podcast and everything." And then here's the episode goes live on April 5th, and here's my address. And thank you so much. I never heard back.
Here's my address. He's like, "What does he want me to do? Come over?"
Was that on Facebook?
Yes,
Did he read it?
he read it.
Okay, so maybe
his
he's
wife
sending
read
it.
it.
What kind of wine were you offering?
Come visit me, please.
Dang.
I did forget to say I was a beta reader for a little bit too. So
Oh, you were?
yeah.
How'd you get that option?
Well, when you meet him at the Brave Fest, you can ask him all sorts of things.
Well, let me ask you this: how did you lose it?
How did I lose? Well, I think he circled in on those core group of people as his main crowd. So everybody else was pretty much everybody else at that point. I do have something that you guys might think is terribly interesting. I have a private voicemail recorded by R.C. Bray as Skippy. I kid you not. I got him to do it for me. So it is my voicemail. So I don't know.
Oh my god. Jealous.
Yeah.
I got to interview Craig Allenson.
I've met Craig Allenson.
Well, son of a bitch. Did everybody get a chance to look at the notes? Adam, have you gotten a chance to look at them?
Notes? Look at
Nope.
Notes.
No, I didn't get notes. I just got read chapter 4 and 5.
Okay.
All right, Adam, I'm sending you the Google Doc right now.
I'll be right back.
She's
Marianne's going to read them now.
She's gonna go read chapters 4 and 5.
Oh shit!
I still can hear you.
Oh crap! Sorry.
It was buried.
Buried.
I
There's
said
no
buried.
E. There's no E. There's no A. Where do you get that?
There's plenty of words.
I'm sorry. I'm the foreigner in Buried.
Ah, aha.
Wow.
Aha. Aha.
She would know.
We have an out of the country perspective.
She needs a Z phone. I don't know. She doesn't get any points.
Translate it.
I love the foreigner is telling you how to speak English.
How do you say it in Portuguese?
The translator would say wheat equivalent.
Wheat equivalent.
All right. There we go. We got better. We're better.
I do have one more thing for you, Andy, before we get started. This was my premiere Mary ticket from last night.
I'm going on Saturday. I can't wait.
It was very fun. It's if you like the book, it's the movie's the book.
So
But
that's the reason I'm behind on the listening to this, because I've been listening to Project Hail Mary.
Oh, nice.
And I'm like, oh, I should be listening to the podcast. But the Project Hail Mary is so much better right now because I watched the movie.
Yeah, I could have to listen to it too.
We're gonna send that clip to Craig, Mariane.
Yeah.
Very upset with you.
He's going to kill you off in the next book. I'm sorry.
Well, Jake's already dead, so
He already killed me off.
He's killing one pirate at a time.
I love it how before she's even in the book, she's killed off. That was quick. I don't see anything yet, but
It's the
Hello, monkeys. You have reached Adam. And I, more importantly, am Skippy the Magnificent. Adam can't come to the phone right now because he has more than is necessary of bananas in his mouth, or as you know them as monkeys, bananas! Get the message, and he might get back to you, he might not. I will not. I'm too important. Thank you. Hello, monkey.
That's it.
that's awesome, man.
That is awesome.
And I like how you have the pictures to go with it. That's lovely.
That was from my Brave Fest activity.
Yeah, that's really cool, man.